All right, welcome to everybody who's coming on into the webinar. Just going to hang tight for a few minutes while we wait for the attendees to populate, and we'll be right with you. All right, for those who are just coming in, we're waiting a minute or two just to have the webinar populate, and we'll be right with you. All right, I think we're ready to kick it off here. So hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for SY's first town hall style webinar featuring President of School Year Abroad Tom Hassan and Chair of SY's Board of Trustees Kirk Davenport. My name's Erin Erickson. You'll see me briefly and then I will disappear once I pull this slide down. I am SY's Director of Advancement, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today. Before getting started, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. For those of you who were on the earlier webinar, this will be repeat. But in case this is your first Zoom webinar, everyone's video is off and audio is muted. So if your cat's meowing, your dog's barking, your kids are screaming in the background, nobody will hear that. So rest assured, that is just you. We will be recording this session and plan to make it available to our community afterwards. If in the process of this presentation you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If we don't answer it in the course of the webinar, we will do our best to get back to you. Today's talking points were framed around the questions that were submitted in advance, so hopefully we will be able to cover most of them in some detail over the next 30 to 45 minutes or so. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to SY President Tom Hassan and Chair of the Board, Kirk Davenport. So you should see one or the three of us here. Tom joined SYA as president in June 2016 and brought with him more than 35 years of educational experience, including 3 years as an SYA board member. As the former principal of Phillips Exeter Academy, he served in many capacities during his 26-year tenure, including as math instructor, director of college counseling, director of admissions, assistant principal, acting principal, and principal. Prior to Exeter, Tom worked at Brown and Harvard universities, as well as the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. Under his direction, Exeter became a leader in efforts to further global outreach programs for students and faculty. A graduate of Brown University, Tom earned his MA and Ed.D. degrees at Harvard University. And then we have Kirk. Kirk Davenport practiced law in New York City for over 30 years before moving to Wilson, Wyoming in 2016 with his wife, Peggy. When not in lockdown, and maybe even while we're here, Kirk enjoys an active life in Jackson Hole, downhill and cross-country skiing, biking, hiking, and generally goofing off. You will probably learn that well in the course of this webinar. He and Peggy take a break from this rigorous routine to travel every spring and fall to faraway places and learn about other cultures in true SYA form. In addition to serving as a trustee at School Year Abroad, Kirk also serves on the board of the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance and on the board of the Grand Teton National Park Foundation. He's a graduate of Brown University and Michigan Law School. And with that, I hand it over to Tom and Kirk.
Thank you so much, Erin. And I just want to begin this with two thoughts. One is I want to thank Erin and her team for organizing the entire day. You can imagine that they had to pivot from what they originally conceived to do in April when they were planning last fall to something very different, and they've done a terrific job. So Erin, thank you and your team. We really appreciate all your efforts. The other thing, I know Kirk joins me in this, which is to just say we're thinking of you and your family and hope everyone is healthy and safe. Certainly these are unprecedented times, and our hearts and our thoughts are with you all. So I want to begin there. And Aaron did mention that I've been involved in education for a number of years, and I have to say that I have probably weathered quite a few different crises over time, but none like this as an educator. I'll kind of give you a little insight as to what my life has been like. And I know we all in America right now are experiencing it for the past month and a half. Really, that's why we've been wrestling with how to respond to this virus since early January, actually, because I can remember the early reports coming out of China. And obviously, we had a group of students in Beijing. We've had students there for over 25 years. And this group this year was a particularly fun and active group of kids. But we're hearing reports, and clearly, always what we do with SWA is health and safety is our prime driver of decisions we make. And early on, it became clear to us two things. One is that the travel was being restricted. In fact, travel out of the country was quickly being ended. And the other piece is in China, we have a relationship with a school, and the schools in China were actually being closed. So we had to make that decision quickly that we needed to evacuate our students. And we had a little bit of time, but and the kids probably took about 5 days to get out of China. Our resident director did a phenomenal job, John McLaughlin, who actually ended up getting out himself, but was on literally the last flight into Logan from Beijing. So we handled that well. And at that point in time, as most of the world thought, well, it's going to be a virus that's going to be contained in China. So we had this brilliant idea to offer the students in China to do one of two things: either go back to their sending school to finish out the school year. Now this again is in January, or that would stick with SYA. We'd get them online for a few weeks and then send them to Italy to spend the year there. And the quick and interesting footnote there is that idea actually rose from the faculty in Italy who was trying to figure out a way to help these students. And that's what SYA is all about to me, which is creativity and thoughtfulness.
And at the time, Tom, I think we all thought, what could possibly be a safer place than Italy? What a great idea.
And then literally as we're getting the kids ready for that flight, things really went south in Italy, from the north and beginning to go south. So where our campus is in Italy. So we ended up saying to the China kids, sorry, can't get you to Italy. Do you want to stay online with us for the rest of the year? Most of them have, which is great. And the Italy kids left, and I think one or two decided to go back to their sending school. And then we know what the next part of the story is, which is that in France and Spain, kids had to evacuate as well. What was guiding us, just quickly, was that we wanted to maintain SYA in country as long as we could. On the other hand, we're balancing the health and safety. And so I think we got it pretty right. And in fact, given where the parents, the kind of words we've heard from them, they're very appreciative that we're able to walk that fine line and get the kids back safely in that. And Kirk might want to comment a little bit about what's happened in terms of the finances of SYA in terms of those decisions.
Sure, I will go to that. First, I just want to say how lucky we are to have Tom as our fearless leader. The response to this succession of curveballs could not have been better. And I told Team Awesome, led by Tom, that we get an A+ for the performance this year. Not only did we make good decisions as a team, but we communicated them very effectively. And I saw so many wonderful emails from parents saying what a great job you're doing. And I've told everyone on the board this, and I'll share it with this group too, that those emails saying you're doing a great job are incredibly important to the morale of the team, who is working day and night to try to make good decisions. Every year you can count on a whole lot of emails coming in saying what a terrible job we're doing at this, that, or the other thing at any school. But when you really think something's going right, please take the time to, not just SYA, but whoever it is, because those emails are so meaningful. And in this case, there was just a flood of fabulous praise. We have such an intrepid group. Everybody pretty much wanted to stay as long as they could. They were willing to take some risk in the early days. And so we tried to be responsive to what we were hearing, but I think we made great decisions. Tom led the team. The whole effort was fabulous, Tom. So thank you.
And I'm going to do a quick shout out of thanks to Kirk because, as a president of an organization with the chair of the board, we worked hand in hand. And there are many weekends where Kirk and I were talking all weekend of trying to make these decisions. And what was driving us in this is, again, the health and safety and the ability to the air and where schools open in the local area. So we quickly established some criteria and we stuck with it. So that's great to see. Yeah, the other piece I'd say about this year, which I think is really underscores SYA, which is the pivot ability of our faculty and our kids to go to something different. And that's the kind of thing that for me SYA is all about, which is to get the curveballs and figure out how to handle those and in a mature, thoughtful, creative way. And I will say our faculty has done a phenomenal job. If you're on the webinar with Eric, you heard all about the online experience that we've been providing our students. In fact, I've gotten some parents writing to us and say, hey, can you help tell our other schools where our other kids are how to do this because it's not working well, but you guys are doing a great job. So that's nice to hear. And the other thing I'd say is that the students themselves have been incredibly resilient. And as an educator, I think what's really hard for me to watch is how, there's nothing normalcy and the rights of, ending the year in the way we always do in a thoughtful way. We couldn't do that this year. And I just watched the kids, decide how to keep in touch with each other and the faculty. And what's been really fun for me to watch is these kids, again, are watching the world unfold in real time, and they still have their connections with their faculty and host families, and to kind of keep that conversation and that real strong connection going, which is great to see. What I'd love to do is just pivot for a moment myself to next year and how we're handling that. So we sent out our acceptance letters in March, early March, just as all of this is really unfolding. So we have given people till May 1st to let us know whether they're interested or not. We decided right from the start that if they send in the contract with a deposit, that if we decide we can't run or there are other things related to the virus, that they would get that deposit back. And I think that that's been really helpful as parents do it. So we're waiting till next week to hear. I would say we have a number of people and maybe 100 or so who said in some form or fashion that they're sticking with us and seeing how things unfold. And what we've said to people at this point in time is we really would love to make next year happen. That we do know right away that we're probably going to start in September a little bit online with courses and orientation, getting them connected to their host families, and with the thought of getting them over to country in October. Clearly, there are some triggers there. One is visas and air travel. So we're keeping a careful eye on that. And the other thing, again, overrides all of this, which is can we provide a healthy and safe environment for them once they're there? So we're very much monitoring this day to day, keeping people informed as to what goes on. And clearly the biggest hurdle for all of us is the comfort level of parents and kids in this. And Kirk will mention we had this board meeting last weekend, and on the SYA board are 6 school heads, all of whom are wrestling as SYA is about what next year is going to look like, and we don't have the crystal ball. So.
Let me back up a little bit and then I'll circle back to next year. I want to cover just a little bit about the financial implications of last year. When we first realized we were up to our ass in alligators in January, Tom and I were talking, it was probably Saturday, I don't remember. And we decided right away, we're going to make the right decisions without regard to cost. Let's do right by the families and kids, and the cost will be what it'll be. And luckily, we're a strong organization with a very strong endowment, although we need your help. I will get to that. So we did some things that were very generous and gracious. that other institutions haven't done. We picked up the airfare for kids who had to get out of there quickly back when the airlines were gouging in their pricing. We offered a significant tuition reduction for the remainder of the year for the kids who stayed with us online, recognizing that online, however great we are at it, it's not the same as being there. And you've probably been reading in the New York Times and elsewhere about students and families complaining to other institutions that haven't done that. And I'm not advocating protest. I'm just saying we did the right thing very graciously right off the bat. We will take a financial hit for last year. It's meaningful, but it's also very sustainable. We have very strong operating reserves that we hope to never have to use. And we will be using those, some of them this year. So, we took a hit last year. We're anticipating that we'll take a hit next year. We expect our enrollment to be below our target. And that target is now 125 full-time kids. Maybe it'll go up above that, but we want a target that we think in a normal year we can beat. Next year is not going to be a normal year. Anywhere in the world, we have the insights, as Tom said, from our fellow trustees who run other schools. The US is a little bit behind Europe, so it's conceivable that Europe is up and running, even though the US is not, as the school year starts. I'm not hoping for that, but I am hoping that Europe is a safe place for our kids to be next year, and that at the time when parents have to decide that, which is way sooner than next September, they will anticipate that and feel comfortable. Everything's changing so fast, we don't know. So we got a lot of contingency planning going. We are expecting to incur some one-time costs in the coming year as well. Nothing that's existential. You hate to lose money, but we do have reserves and a strong endowment. We're not going to touch the endowment. We might tap into our reserves for this coming year, but that's what they're there for, the once in 100-year pandemic. So the bottom line is the financial consequences of this are negative, as you might surmise, but are not existential. I think there are a lot of institutions who will sustain body blows that are not survivable. That is not our case. We're very lucky. I actually imagine a world where when the dust settles, a lot of our competitors have decided, this study abroad stuff is tricky. I think maybe we'll just let SYA do it, which is where I think we should be now, but hopefully we'll get there. I think what happens in robust economic times is every professor wants to host a trip to France or Italy or Spain or wherever, there's funding for it. And then when something like this happens, there isn't funding. And so all those things that have been siphoning off people who really should be SYA applicants and students, I think many of those will disappear. So I'm very optimistic about our future. I think we're going to come back to the future in a little bit, Tom, so I'll hand it back to you. Let's see, which is our topic now, Tom?
Sure. So actually, why don't I pick up on that theme, which is the future, which is for a number of years since I started SYA, we've been talking about what's the shape of SYA in the years to come. And clearly there's a strong component for us of using the place in strong ways. And I hope if you haven't seen Eric's seminar earlier on, that you've been hearing stories from students and current students who literally are out of their seats much, much more. We're using the place and designing our curriculum to that. And so we've been working with our faculty on redesigning courses to, again, experiential, while keeping the rigor of what we've always done at SYA in terms of, the language immersion and the math and English. So all of that will maintain the same. On the other hand, we're just adding a lot of really exciting words. And let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about here. which is in Spain. For years, they taught a course on political theory, and they would be sitting in the classroom in Spanish talking about this. And the professor, the faculty member there had that light bulb moment of like, okay, I get what we should really be doing, which is getting the kids out in Zaragoza, working on political campaigns, seeing what the issues are, working side by side with peers, and then coming back in and talking about what they're hearing and what they're seeing. And so it's been terrific to see that kind of hands-on learning. I think that that's what it's all about. So we launched a few years back a comprehensive campaign, the first ever that SYA has in its over 50-year history. What we're trying to do out of that are a few important things, which are, it's really for people. It's for our faculty members in terms of compensation, in terms of faculty development. It's for our students in terms of enhanced financial aid. And unlike most comprehensive campaigns, it's not about buildings. Fortunately, we own our building in Rennes, we own our building in Zaragoza, and in Italy, we have a long-term rental. So it really is about SYA and its people. So it's exciting to watch that unfold. And Kirk, you might want to amplify a little bit more on the campaign from the trustee end of things.
The target for the campaign is 18 million. I think we're at 11 now. In light of the circumstances, we've stopped making direct outreach largely, but we are receiving incoming calls. So it's not too late to participate in this campaign. If you're in the mood, I promise you we will take your call. You know, we're very lucky that we have the reserves and the endowment that we do. That's why we're going to come out of this very strong. So I'm thrilled that we launched the capital campaign when we did. Obviously, this is a curveball in our lives and in everything all of us is doing, all of us are doing. So, you know, we're taking a pause, but it's not over, and I'm optimistic that we will reach our ambitious goal of 18 million before it's over.
And I would add to that, Kirk, too, that in these comprehensive campaigns, schools also add an important component of them, which is the annual fund. In our case, we call it the SYA fund, which helps fund about 10% of the annual budget. And so that's part of it. And so as people make their gifts to this campaign, we start with a bottom line of giving to the annual fund, and then on top of that, some people may just say, I can just do the annual fund, and that would be terrific. And particularly this year, we really need those gifts to the annual fund. So that's very helpful. And I hope that you get a chance to visit our website and see the pages about the campaign and what we're doing, the stories that align with it. And I know we have some global scholarships that have now come in as a result of this campaign. And so that's great to, again, help students who wouldn't have a chance to do this and to really support them in this great endeavor. It's really been fun to watch.
One of the questions we saw on the list was about China, SYA China. And I want to just take a minute and talk about the decisions that were made there and where we are now. As a board, we are very focused on making sure that we have a sustainable program. And although we have a lot of treasure that you all have given us, thank you, we are not anxious to spend it other than very wisely. So we're trying to be extremely parsimonious with the budget and get to a break-even level budget. The school size is smaller than it was 10 years ago. And so we're adjusting to fit that. In China, the enrollment had been off for, gosh, how many years, Tom? I mean,
I would say 5, 7, yeah.
It's a jagged line, but I think we're down to 21 kids in China, and we'd had 45 at the peak or something. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to recreate Exeter halfway across the world for 20 kids. It just doesn't make economic sense. So we've been talking for a long time about what to do about the declining enrollment in China. And, you know, there are other challenges operating in China. Anyone who's run a business there knows how difficult it can be working with the government. You know, we had complaints over the years about the pollution in Beijing. But the main thing is we had declining enrollment. And So we decided to close the China operation. Tom is leading a project to reimagine China and see if there's a way that we can get back up and running in China. Maybe it's just a summer program. Possibly there's a year-long program that we can reconfigure that will be popular. I'm gonna bet on the summer, but whatever we do will be very mission-driven. It will be consistent with our brand of excellence. And if we can't operate at a level of excellence that's consistent with what you should expect of us, then we will not reopen in China. But that's one of the many things that we're at work on. That project's a few weeks behind where we hoped it would be in light of recent events.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll just say on sustainability is we're focused on making sure that we have a balanced budget going forward. That's not easy, but we are on it, and we are aware of our responsibility to manage your treasure very responsibly. So Tom and I have had a lot of conversations with the board and others about how to do that, and we've made a lot of changes that are headed towards financial stability and sustainability in terms of operating budgets. We got a little more to go, but we're on that. So we take that very seriously.
Yeah. Let me just add a few things, and then I know Erin has been collecting questions, and so she'll be able to hand them off to Kirk and to me. And I just want to take a moment to thank the team I have of administrators in the home office first there, which is Rachel Keegan-Kelly in the admissions office, work incredibly hard in their outreach, and they get out to schools to talk to them. They're now doing a lot online kind of recruitment. And even with those heroic efforts, it as Kirk said, it's been really hard to get kids to go over to China. And in fact, one of the measures for us is that the study of Mandarin in the US has been declining, particularly on the East Coast. And so it's a hard language, and I think, and we see it in the strength in numbers over in Spain, which is a lot of kids are taking Spanish these days in high school. And I want to thank Mike McCarthy, who's our CFO, who's just working day and night, particularly this last 6 months, and getting those refunds out, and making sure that we're in that financial strength that Kirk has talked about. And Erin and her team, I thank them again. They had to kind of change their approach. Erin and I were a lot on the road this year with the campaign, but we've had to kind of go stateside and think of creative ways like this one to outreach and maintain our connections with our alums. And I want to thank Eric and the whole faculty who, again, this year have shown above and beyond their dedication to SYA, and literally driving kids to the airport to get them there, to get them out safely, to give them the hugs that they needed at a time when it was scary, and then to also just kind of pivot in the ways they have to be really creative online. I've watched the stuff that's been happening, and so it's I'm just blessed to be running this organization with such a great team. So I want to hand it over to Erin, and Erin, you can give us some questions.
Great, thanks. Actually, most of the questions have been about China.
Yeah,
If anybody's participating and has another question, please feel free to send it in. This is where we'll do kind of whatever comes through the box. We'll review those and throw them out to Tom and Kirk. So please take advantage of that while we've got them both on the line here.
I'm happy to answer the China questions if you want, Erin.
Sure, yeah.
I think it's Edith and Mary.
Okay.
Reading the chat box right.
Okay. You go for it, Kirk.
So I imagine it must be heartbreaking to see China close. And I hear you saying that, and I feel your pain. And it was not something we did lightly. I think Tom and I have been working together for 3 years now, which is 6 board meetings, and we have talked about China every single time. And what do we do? Why is it declining? And I'll share with you what we've learned, although I don't think we have the perfect answer. There are a lot of reasons for the decline. I think there isn't any one reason. We worried that the pollution was the main reason. We considered moving to another location in China. There there are lots of problems with that, including that people who go to China want to be in Beijing. I'm trying to remember the name of the place we looked into, Tom. It's
Kunming.
Kunming, yeah.
Yep.
And some colleges had operations there, but it's a slightly different dialect, and there are a number of issues with it. We have heard from our member schools and the trustees who are school heads that interest in their Chinese language programs are declining. Not everywhere, but generally. So there are less Chinese language students to choose from for SYA in China. There are other Chinese programs that are a little less challenging than ours, that maybe are siphoning off demand a little bit. But the bottom line is we don't really know if it's all the above. That's my suspicion, or if there's one thing that's really dominant. But we do know that the enrollment was declining. It's also quite difficult to get an English and math teacher to relocate to Beijing, and those have typically been Americans, so they're hard to come by. And we do have an eye on the excellence that people expect, and if we're struggling to fill those slots, that's not a good sign for sustainability. So we considered this decision many times before we finally reluctantly made the decision to close China. And we hope that there is a future for SYA in China, and we're not completely throwing in the towel, but we want to configure a program, whether it's a year or less or summer, that our member schools will buy into and can support. And we just didn't feel we could afford to keep running a program with a ever declining interest level. So hard decision. I feel your pain. I'm sorry we had to do that. We felt it was the only fiscally responsible thing to do.
And Kirk, the only other piece I'd add is people ask the question of, well, couldn't you figure out other recruiting ways to find those kids? And I just want to reassure folks that watching our admissions team, which included a number of SYA China alums on the recruiting end, they tried every which way. And I right there with you, Kirk. It was one of the toughest decisions we've had to make. But again, we've got a reimagining group that's starting up. I'm already in touch with a number of member schools to pick their brains about what might work to get kids to do some stuff over in China with us. So more to follow on that.
Mary, I see your question about your donation, and I think we owe you a phone call. So we will work that out.
Kirk, you're much better at this than I am because I can't see the questions.
Yeah,
so
I can throw in on that one. For any donations that have come in for SYA China through like the annual fund, those are all for current operations, and this year SYA China is operating. So those funds that you've given will all have already gone to help SYA China this year. That's the short version of that. There have been a number of other questions about concern for next fall and kind of the contingency planning with if Europe doesn't open borders.
Yeah. So we are daily in conversation about the options of what we can do. And again, as I said earlier, we're really trying to operate on the fact that we'd love to be open next year. That we and the sentiment of the people who've said yes to us is we're in for it. We love SYA. Want to do it for the whole year. If that is not possible, we have two other options. One of them is to offer a second semester only option. So we're playing that scenario out. And the third, which is the place we don't want to go, but other issues may force our hand on this, is that we can't offer an option next year. But we we've been 50 plus years strong on this, and we want to keep going as hard as we can, like we did this year, to offer SYA. So we're keeping our eye on this very carefully.
Yeah, and let me say that just to echo what Tom said, but we are going to run next year, starting in the fall, unless something physically prevents it. So I am very optimistic that we're going to delay the start until mid-September, I think, right, Tom?
Mid-September, and then online for a little bit before we get them over.
So we're not actually putting kids on airplanes until October. And, I'm kind of an optimistic guy, so maybe this is Pollyanna, but I don't think so. I think Europe will be open for business by then. I think that Europe will likely be a safer place to go to school at that point, particularly the SYA formula than, for example, boarding schools in the US, which, involve living together in dorms. So I'm optimistic that we will be able to run. If it's irresponsible, it's obviously if they don't have visas, if there are travel bans, if the mandate in the local countries is that schools should be closed, we'll take all that into account, and we're not going to run no matter what. But we're going to run if it's at all possible, and I am optimistic that it will be. We are, as Tom says, scenario planning. So, we know it may not work out as well as Kirk's glittering view of the world imagines. So we're looking at all kinds of options, including closing for the whole year, but I don't think there's any real chance of that. Anything could happen, so we're thinking about it. And, what happens if we have very small classes? What will we do then? We won't run a program that doesn't have enough core that it's a good social scenario for the people, but we have a lot of fixed costs, so we might run a very small program in one or more of our locations to, change 15 lives instead of 50 in that location. So we're all over this. We're thinking about it. We're looking at our levers. We're looking at local law issues about if we don't run, can we furlough the faculty? There are no plans to do anything like that, but we're looking at everything.
Tom, this might be a question for you, but maybe also for Kirk, because you are board members. Some of them are heads of school, but what are you hearing from member schools regarding their commitment to SYA?
Oh, I think they're very much supportive of us in what we do. Some schools, as Kirk kind of alluded to earlier, some schools have started their own programs. Some of them right now are saying, gee, I'm not sure we have the bandwidth to do that anymore. And so my hope is that they'll turn to us, the leaders in this space, and say, we'll send our kids to SYA. So I think the member schools are incredibly supportive of us. At some point in time this summer, though, the kids are going to have to make a decision about whether they're, going to go back to their sending schools or remain at their sending schools or come to SYA. So we've got that, trying to figure out that sweet spot of when those kids need to make that decision.
There are a lot of questions I see, Aaron, about running next year and how we will decide it. Let me address the one. Let's see. Let me look it up. Who is the author of this great? Elizabeth Tripp Barr, a future potential parent for next year. So, can I just say at the beginning of this, I love you, Elizabeth Tripp Barr. Thank you for hanging in there with us. We are going to run this program if it can be done. We don't, I don't think, have to dip into our endowment to run the program. So, if we did, that is something we'd consider, but we have very robust operating reserves planning for, the once in 100-year meteor. So we're ready.
So Kirk, I would add here that Elizabeth's had 3 SYA experiences already with 2 of her kids. So I'll explain how that math works, which is her older son did a year in Italy and a year in Spain for SYA, which is a rare thing that happens, but every once in a while a student wants 2 years of it. And she had a son right now who just came back from Spain. So
great. So, you asked about the online curriculum for the year. Uh, I don't think we have that document yet because I don't think we expect to run a full year online. It is one of the things we're thinking about. But I guess my own instinct is that it's much more likely that we're online for a limited period of time, and then we can get kids over there. I'm not sure how much demand there will be. I know you're a savvy SYA consumer, but I'm not sure everybody will, or how many people will see the joy in going to SYA if you don't get to go. So if we're online the whole year, that's going to be challenging. I hope we don't get anywhere near that. There are a couple other questions about when will France and Spain and Italy open their borders. And we don't know any more than you see in the papers. I will offer this optimistic assessment. They are beginning to open now. We're seeing everywhere, even here, Texas, Florida, Boeing's opening a plant with 27,000 people. We're going to get a lot more data points on what happens if we relax the restrictions.
And Kirk, I'd add here, one of the triggers that we used this past year is our wonderful RDs who have very strong connections within the local area. And so, that they are asking questions, they're bringing us real life, kind of data points of what's happening. And you're right. I mean, in Europe, things are starting to kind of get back in a month or two ahead of where America is. So I remain optimistic on that side.
Me too. And, obviously the economies of every country, but the European countries included, which are much more fragile than ours, have taken a severe hit. So while it's been getting more and more difficult for our kids to get visas, we've managed to do it. Anyone who's interested, we're getting their name in the queue for next year, including your child, Elizabeth. And so we are doing what we can to position. I'm optimistic that France, Spain, and Italy will realize they should let people travel freely, and visas should be easy to come by because it will help their economy. We learned recently of a movement over there to eliminate visas for travel inside the EU and into the EU from certain friendly countries at all. So I think by the time we get to October, it's going to be very, very different. But I don't really know more than you guys do. I'm optimistic, but just my nature. Every week, the world looks different. So, we're monitoring this and we're reacting and we're trying to communicate with the families that are interested as well as we did, in the prior year now ending. And we hope we will entice enough people to join us that will run. At the moment, it looks very strong, like we have very strong classes in all three places, and we're expecting to run. So that could change, but that's our expectation.
So Aaron, I know you're the keeper of the clock and the keeper of the questions as we're ending. Are there a few other things you want us to address?
There's a nice question here from Ailey Higgins, who's a China alum. Are there any ways SYA alumni can support or engage with the current SYA students and staff? I can say a brief word about that just because that's part of what the advancement team does. And thanks for your question, Ailey. The short answer is that we're very, one of the great things that has come out of this is that we've been pushed into this virtual space. So being able to offer this to everybody today, we're hoping to do many more sessions and webinars like these. In addition, we're really excited to be kind of getting some Zoom reunions launched for, alums from different classes and possibly even, virtual events and gatherings, whether that's geographic or by country or some other category. But I would say stay tuned for opportunities in the coming weeks about connecting with students specifically. Again, it's not that we would ever have wanted to bring them home, but having students back in the US does put them in a similar time zone to what most of us operate in, and they are thus able to be a little bit more involved with some of the things that we're doing. Whether that's joining a chat group and speaking in the language with alums, or having an alum speaker that comes into a class session and speaks on a certain topic, things like that. If alums are interested, we would love to make some of those opportunities available. So look in your email upcoming for some of those.
One thing I'd like to add as we near the end here, and I don't want to cut off questions, Aaron. Happy to stay as long as there are questions. But we have a wonderful board of trustees. And on that board are, is it 6, Tom, or 8 heads of school?
6 school heads and then 12 alums.
Civilians, yeah. So we like to describe ourselves as the civilians and the smart people. And the heads of school are the smart people. They bring so much wisdom to this board and to Tom's, at Tom's fingertips. He can survey what's happening with leading boarding schools and day schools all over the country. It's an incredible resource for Tom. So the board meetings are really fun. So many smart people. So I just want you to know that a lot of really dedicated SYA alums and school heads are thinking as hard as they can about how to help Tom navigate this circumstance. We have total confidence in Tom. He is an absolute hero, a great communicator. Those of you who know him know all this already, but I'm going to embarrass him anyway. We're so lucky to have him at the command of the ship in this storm. So this is a very strong time for SYA in terms of our leadership, both at Tom's president level and at the board level. So we are going to get through this. It's going to cost us some money, and that's a bummer, but we are going to get through it. And I see the other side of this as a very strong SYA with, I hope, more demand because other people in the foreign study business have decided to get out of it. Maybe China is resurrected. I hope so. I'm not sure, but that would be great. So, difficult times, but we are a survivor. Strong leadership with Tom. Thank you, Tom. And thank you to all of you for the donations you've made to keep us strong. And please remember the SYA fund. The fund expires in June?
End of June, yep.
Okay. So you still have plenty of time, tons of time to make a contribution.
So let me end it this way, Kirk. Thank you. You're too kind with your words, but let me just kind of talk for a minute about why I made the decision as I finished up at Exeter to work with SYA, which is I've known it for all my time connected to Exeter. Obviously, is one of the founding schools. And what I saw coming back was the magic of our faculty who had taught over there and the students. And it's clearly the language and the cultural immersion, which is important. But I would end on this, which is what I think is the most important thing that students and faculty who've been connected to SYA enjoy is a sense of empathy and understanding being the other. And I think teenagers in particular are much into themselves and can't get the perspective of the greater, the other and the world. And SYA gives them that, and it's a lifelong gift. And I have to say that drives me every day in what I do, which is that important mission, which is the worldview and an empathetic view of the world. And I will end on this note. I think we need it now more than ever. So thank you for your support. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to everybody who's joined us today. If we didn't get to your question, then we'll try and reach out to you separately. But thanks to everybody who submitted those questions in the Q&A. And if you haven't had a chance, it is one day for you today, and that's an opportunity just to see some things going on in the community. So check that out on our website and our Instagram and Facebook pages. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.
Take care.
Take care. Bye, everyone.